God afton och shalom vänner. Profetisk uppdatering 20 januari 2024. Lördag kväll. Och så här fint var det från uppe på Ramberget när vi var där i eftermiddag. Vi hann ju inte dit i tid för solen gick i moln. Men det var ändå vackert. Det är vackert i naturen här nu. Med snö på träden. Får se hur länge det varar. Göteborg är Göteborg. NTEB, Now the End Begins, skriver stående ensam på scenen vid World Economic Forum 2024 med Klaus Schwab sittande vid sin sida, la Emmanuel Macron upp sin vision för Israel och världen. När Frankrikes president Emmanuel Macron talade vid World Economic Forums årliga möte i Davos uttalade han sig om krisen i Gaza, Röda havet och konflikten mellan Ryssland och Ukraina. Om Israel-Palestina-konflikten sa han: en politisk lösning med 2 stater är den enda lösningen som kommer att tillåta stabilitet och fred för Israel. Emmanuel Macron gjorde några explosiva kommentarer vid World Economic Forum 2024 medan Klaus Schwab alltså satt och myste på scenen bredvid honom medan han talade. Macron har en mycket bestämd vision om hur han vill omforma vår värld och kommer närmare och närmare att genomföra det för varje år som går när han är vid makten. Du kommer säkert ihåg att han var en av de unga globala ledare som Klaus Schwab installerade för att driva den nya världsordningen. Inte nog med det. World Economic 2024 pratade om den kommande Carbon Footprint Tracker som kommer att fungera som en föregångare till vilddjurets märke, spåra alla dina rörelser och ge dig en social kreditpoäng. Det kan vi ju tillägga att det är det som händer i Kina som vi har sagt i många år nu. Kina som förebild för den marxistiska nya världsordningen. Den röda hästen inom parentes i det profetiska ordet. Han skriver också: Bill Gates gav också en uppdatering om sitt mänskliga implanterbara Quantum Dot Microneedle Delivery System vaccin. Slutcitat. Mikronål, alltså pyttenålar. Och så finns det ju de som försvarar Bill Gates och kompani och försöker inbilla oss att han är god och generös. Glöm det. Vi hatar Bill Gates äckliga vaccin och vi skulle aldrig gå in i en duperad kyrka som görs till vaccinationscentral. Behåll skräpet, hälsar vi. Så är det med det. Amir Safati skriver på Telegram: i sitt samtal med president Biden igår kväll upprepade premiärminister Netanyahu sin konsekventa ståndpunkt i åratal som han också uttryckte vid en presskonferens dagen innan. Efter elimineringen av Hamas måste Israel förbli i full säkerhetskontroll över Gazaremsan för att säkerställa att Gaza inte längre kommer att utgöra ett hot mot Israel. Och detta står i konflikt med kravet på palestinsk suveränitet. Den amerikanska administrationen försöker aktivt avsätta Netanyahu och tillsätta en ledare som går med på en 2-statslösning. Bara så att ni vet. I en intervju för 3 dagar sedan hade chefen för Hamas diasporakontor Khaled Meshal upprepat rörelsens förkastande av 2-statslösningen och sagt att det palestinska folket kräver citat, befrielse från den israeliska ockupationen, självständighet och upprättandet av en palestinsk stat från Libanons gräns till den egyptiska, nämligen istället för Israel. Slut citat. Vi påminner oss om vad det står i Joels profetia i Gamla testamentet, kapitel 3, vers 1. Du se, i de dagarna och på den tiden när jag gör slut på Judas och Jerusalems fångenskap. Det här är ju inte bara bokstavligt, detta är ju också andligt. Skall jag samla alla hedna folk och föra dem ner till Josafats dal. Där ska jag hålla dom över dem för mitt folks, min arvedel Israels skull, som de har förskingrat bland hedna folken, de har delat mitt land. Gud kommer alltså att döma alla dessa som tvingar fram en tvåstatslösning när det kommer. För det kommer. Det förstår vi av profetian. Men Gud kommer att döma. Det är Guds land. Det är Guds arvedel. Han har gett landet till judarna. Abrahams, Isak och Jakobs efterkommande. Här kommer nu en video. Den handlar om något annat. Den handlar om romerska katolska kyrkan och en del av de läror de har som går emot Bibeln. Det finns mycket mer, men här är ju en del. Här berättas om hur påven kompromissar mer och mer. Och hans utnämnda närmaste kardinal, vad ska man säga, han kan nog få vem som helst att få hicka. Men ni får se själva. Imorgon har vi Parousia missionmöte. Så får vi se om det blir uppdatering, eller i vilket fall så lägger vi ju ut predikningar, våra predikningar från mötet. Men vi återkommer. Gud välsigne er och shalom.
Apostasy has entered the Catholic Church. Pope Francis, the supposed representation of Christ on the earth, has turned from the belief in what the Bible teaches and turned to what the world finds acceptable in its place, denying the importance of the Ten Commandments, blessing same-sex marriages, and appointing a cardinal just below himself who has a shocking past. The worst part about it is it seems as if it will only get worse. Galatians 1:8 tells us that if anyone, even an angel from heaven, preach any other gospel than the true gospel of the Bible, that person must be accursed. This is really the definition of apostasy, turning away from a faith that you previously believed in. Before we evaluate this apostasy and this strange cardinal, first I must point out an extreme error done within the Catholic Church. While researching this video, I was reading through an article, and this is something that's often said amongst Catholics, where they refer to Pope Francis as the Holy Father with capital letters. This quote from someone within the church says, "It is simply wrong and harmful to the church to receive every declaration of the Holy Father as an expression of papal teaching. There's at least 25 verses in the New Testament that refer to the Father, capital letter, in heaven, that's God alone, but I'll point out the most obvious and important one. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven." This first case of apostasy that we'll look at took place in 2021 when Pope Francis referred to the Ten Commandments and said they really practically weren't that important to him. The Ten Commandments are a foundation of the Christian faith. Turning from them is apostasy. Pope Francis on the Ten Commandments, "I observe them, but not as absolutes." The exact quote was, when asked if he disregards the Ten Commandments, he said, "No, I observe them, but not as absolutes, because I know that what justifies me is Jesus Christ." The Christian faith, which is based entirely on the Bible, has two verses in the New Testament, the covenant that we're under, in reference to following the commands of God. 1 Corinthians 7:19, "Circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing, but keeping the commandments of God is what matters." For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. If the 10 commandments aren't an absolute, then what is? Well, apparently none of the statutes or commands mentioned in the Bible or even in the New Testament, because what we just saw recently was Pope Francis approves blessing for same-sex couples if the rituals don't resemble marriage. Clearly, the don't resemble marriage part is just something to fall back on when conflicts arise, when people don't like what they're seeing, when it probably will represent and resemble marriage. This is obviously just moving in the direction of away from the faith, away from the Bible, and towards what the world wants to represent is acceptable. God gave us a clear warning about this. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. The fruit of Pope Francis and the people he's been putting in power, which we'll look at one of them next, it will absolutely blow your mind, but we can see what the fruit of this has already started to produce. Just this last Christmas, what did we see at a Catholic church in a southern Italian village? Well, sadly, we saw a nativity scene with 2 mothers instead of Mary and Joseph. You think you've given an inch, in reality, you've given a mile. This is going to continue to happen as the church conforms itself to look more like the world until eventually the church has no visual representation of what the Bible tells it and tells us to look like. This road to apostasy is being paved by Pope Francis. He's raised people to high positions of power in the Catholic Church who are extremely questionable in what they do. Victor Emmanuel Fernandez is a cardinal in Rome, a close associate of Pope Francis, and is to the level of leadership just below the Pope. Cardinal Fernandez was named prefect of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith in July 2023. Let's take a look at some of the books he's written. I'm sorry this might get disgusting, but it has to be said. In 1998, he wrote a book, Mystical Passion, Spirituality, and Sensuality. Don't forget that this is written by someone who's supposed to be celibate, so why is this a subject that's even on his mind? Within the book, there's a chapter detailing the differences between male and female orgasms and how one can find God's love in either, while there's another chapter that was titled God in the Partner's Orgasm. A quote in the book in relation to those subjects without getting in too much detail says, after mentioning the act that, quote, it can also be a sublime act of worship of God. And in 1995, he wrote another book, Heal Me With Your Mouth, The Art of Kissing. At current day, he says that he wouldn't have written at least the first book and kind of disavows himself from both of them, but that's probably because in the 90s he didn't foresee a future where people would have the ability to make videos and commentary on his books, and that it wouldn't just be controlled by the news that we would never see. Apostasy within any belief of people who follow the gospel and believe the truth of Jesus Christ is a terrible thing, and there's actually prophecies that this would eventually happen in the future with a certain wicked pope. The Catholic Church, which for a long time throughout history was the largest group of people who believed and followed the gospel of Jesus Christ, even though some unbiblical teachings were still going on, but throughout time, some prophecies of a coming corrupt pope have come from those of the Catholic faith. St. Malachi's prophecy of the popes revealed that there would be a final black pope, Petros Romanus. There's rumors that the third secret of Fatima, which hasn't been revealed, actually has a prophecy within it of a coming evil pope in the future. While this next mention isn't a prophecy, Malachi Martin, who was a Jesuit-trained priest and exorcist who worked within the Vatican, and said there was a high-ranking group of individuals who had given themselves to Satan. On June 29, 1972, Pope Paul VI even stated that the smoke of Satan has entered the church. 2 Thessalonians 2:3 prophesies that there will be a falling away from the faith towards the last days, and with an estimated 1.2 billion Roman Catholics in the world, this apostasy that's happening will absolutely turn many away, hopefully not unto unbelief or another religion, but this is what's prophesied to happen. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. If we look at the definition of apostasy, we can see that this is exactly what's happening within the Catholic Church. The abandonment or renunciation of a religious or political belief. The Catholic Church has decided to stop teaching the Bible in its entirety, conforming itself to be more like the world. This, along with the continued practices of doing the complete opposite of what the Bible states, as well as relying more on the traditions of men, their own actions, going to men to ask for forgiveness of sins, and believing Jesus isn't enough for salvation, and that when they die, they will have to endure purgatory. Apostasy has sadly entered the Catholic Church, and Pope Francis and many under his leadership are happily leading the way. The time has come to where we need to be in Bible-believing churches who teach the Bible in its entirety, proclaiming that the Bible is perfect, Jesus Christ is enough, and that the only way to get to heaven and to be in right relationship with God is through Jesus alone. I hope and pray you're well. Thanks for watching.